Fascism is a dangerous and authoritarian political ideology. It emerged in Europe after World War I and quickly spread across Italy, Germany, and other nations. Fascism promised stability and strength during a time of great uncertainty and fear. This essay will explore the factors that led to the rise of fascism in Europe, examining its key characteristics, influential figures, and lasting impact on the world. Fascism promoted extreme nationalism, militarism, and totalitarianism. It glorified violence and suppressed individual rights. Fascist regimes sought to control all aspects of society, including government, the economy, and even personal beliefs. Understanding the historical context of fascism's rise is crucial. The aftermath of World War I left Europe devastated. The war resulted in millions of casualties and caused widespread economic hardship. This created an environment ripe for extremist ideologies like fascism to take root.
World War I, which ended in 1918, left Europe deeply scarred. The continent was in ruins, both physically and psychologically. Millions of soldiers and civilians had perished in the conflict. Once thriving cities lay in ruins. The war's devastating impact was felt across all levels of society. The economies of Europe were shattered. The war had depleted national treasuries and disrupted trade. Hyperinflation gripped many countries, rendering savings worthless. Returning soldiers struggled to find work, leading to widespread unemployment and poverty. The war also had a profound psychological impact on the European psyche. The trauma of witnessing unimaginable violence and loss created a sense of disillusionment and despair. People longed for stability and a return to normalcy. However, the future seemed bleak and uncertain. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war. However, it also sowed the seeds of resentment and instability. The treaty blamed Germany for the war and imposed harsh reparations on the defeated nation. This fueled feelings of humiliation and anger among Germans, creating a fertile ground for extremist ideologies that promised revenge and national revival.
The economic turmoil that engulfed Europe after World War I played a significant role in the rise of fascism. The war had devastated national economies, leaving many countries struggling to rebuild. High unemployment, runaway inflation, and widespread poverty created a climate of desperation and discontent. In Germany, hyperinflation reached catastrophic levels. The value of the German mark plummeted, wiping out savings and making it almost impossible for ordinary people to afford basic necessities. The economic crisis fueled social unrest and undermined faith in democratic institutions. Fascist movements capitalized on the economic anxieties of the masses. They offered simple solutions to complex problems, often blaming scapegoats such as Jews or communists for the economic woes. Fascist leaders promised to restore national pride and prosperity. They appealed to the anxieties of the middle class, who feared losing their status and security. By exploiting economic grievances, fascist movements gained traction among a population desperate for change and a return to stability.
The political landscape of post-World War I Europe was one of instability and fragmentation. New democracies, established in the aftermath of the war, struggled to govern effectively. They faced challenges from both the left and the right. Traditional elites, who had lost power and influence, sought to restore the old order. The rise of communism in Russia sent shockwaves through Europe. Many feared that communist revolutions would spread to their own countries. This fear was exploited by right-wing movements, including fascists, who presented themselves as the only viable alternative to communist chaos. The weakness of democratic institutions and the lack of consensus among political parties made it difficult to address the pressing issues facing Europe. Political gridlock and ineffective governance further eroded public faith in democracy, creating an opening for authoritarian alternatives like fascism to gain a foothold. Fascist movements exploited this political instability. They presented themselves as strong and decisive forces that could restore order and stability. They appealed to those who longed for a return to strong leadership and a sense of national unity, regardless of the cost to individual liberties.
The rise of charismatic leaders. Charismatic leaders capitalized on the anxieties and frustrations of the masses. Skilled orators, they tapped into emotions, channeling them into political force. Mussolini and Hitler are prime examples. They rose to prominence post-World War I, promising national restoration. They appealed to national pride and fear of communism. offering simple solutions to complex problems.
Section 6. The politics of hate targeting minorities and opposition. Fascist regimes systematically targeted minorities and political opponents. Scapegoating was used to consolidate power and redirect anger. Jews were a primary target, facing discrimination, violence, and genocide. Political opponents were also persecuted, silencing any form of criticism. Section 7. The power of propaganda, shaping public opinion. Propaganda played a central role in the rise and consolidation of power by fascist regimes. Fascist leaders understood the power of mass media and used it effectively to shape public opinion, demonize their opponents, and create a cult of personality around their leadership. Newspapers, radio, and film were all co-opted to disseminate fascist ideology. Propaganda ministries were established to control the flow of information and ensure that only messages that supported the regime reached the public. Fascist propaganda often relied on emotional appeals, simplistic slogans, and repetition to imprint its messages on the minds of the masses. It glorified the nation, the leader, and the fascist movement, while portraying enemies as weak, treacherous, and subhuman. This constant barrage of propaganda created an environment where dissenting voices were silenced, critical thinking was discouraged, and blind obedience to the regime was expected. It effectively molded public opinion and created a society where fascist ideology was widely accepted, even embraced, by a significant portion of the population.
Section 8. Consolidation of power, the totalitarian grip. Fascist regimes quickly consolidated power, eliminating opposition. They established totalitarian states, suppressing individual rights and controlling society. Secret police like the Gestapo silenced dissent and terrorized the population. Arbitrary arrests, torture and executions were common. Concentration camps imprisoned political opponents and minorities. Fascist regimes controlled politics, economy, culture, and education. The goal was a totalitarian society, suppressing dissent and individuality.
Section 9. The descent into darkness, the horrors of fascism. The rise of fascism in Europe culminated in one of the darkest chapters in human history, World War II and the Holocaust. Driven by their ideologies of racial superiority, territorial expansion, and violent nationalism, fascist regimes plunged the world into a global conflict that claimed tens of millions of lives. Nazi Germany, under Adolf Hitler's leadership, unleashed a campaign of aggression and genocide that shocked the world. Fueled by their belief in Aryan supremacy and their hatred of Jews, the Nazis systematically murdered 6 million Jews in death camps across Europe. The horrors of fascism went beyond the Holocaust. Millions of others, including Roma, homosexuals, political opponents, and people with disabilities, were also persecuted and murdered by Nazi Germany and its collaborators. World War II, sparked by fascist aggression, left Europe in ruins once again. Cities lay in rubble, economies were shattered, and millions were dead. The war's end marked the defeat of fascism, but also served as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked hatred, nationalism, and authoritarianism. Section 10. The legacy of fascism. Lessons for today. The legacy of fascism continues to haunt the world. The horrors of the Holocaust and World War II serve as a stark warning about the dangers of extremist ideologies, unchecked power, and the erosion of democratic values. The lessons of fascism are as relevant today as they were in the 20th century. The rise of populism, nationalism, and xenophobia in many parts of the world bears disturbing echoes of the conditions that allowed fascism to flourish in the 1920s and 30s. It is crucial to remain vigilant against the dangers of fascism and other forms of extremism. This requires defending democratic values, promoting tolerance and understanding, and challenging hate speech and discrimination in all its forms. Education plays a vital role in preventing the resurgence of fascism. By learning from the mistakes of the past and understanding the factors that contributed to the rise of fascism, we can work to create a more just, equitable, and peaceful world.
Section 11. Conclusion: never forget, never again. The rise of fascism in Europe during the 20th century stands as a chilling reminder of the fragility of democracy and the devastating consequences of unchecked hatred and authoritarianism. Fueled by economic despair, political instability, and the charismatic appeal of demagogic leaders, Fascism swept across Europe, leaving a trail of destruction and death in its wake. While fascism was ultimately defeated in World War II, its legacy serves as a warning to future generations. The lessons of the past must not be forgotten. We must remain vigilant against the dangers of extremism, defend democratic values, and promote tolerance and understanding to prevent the horrors of fascism from ever happening again.